Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone this morning? How many of you have checked your iPhone at least 6 times before this day started, right? And how many of you could imagine what your day would have been like if you didn't have access? Well, today we're going to talk.
I think you might need the mic first.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk together as a group about what that might mean to people who don't have access to the digital world and the digital divide and the risks attached to it. My name's Royden Traynor. Matt asked me to help out with this because I'm quite familiar with the organization. Give you just a brief kind of touch point on why I'm here. My day job is I head up an organization called Greenspring Bioinnovation. And why I mention that is because it has a lot of the same organic characteristics of what makes this organization work. Greenspring is really focused on the bioeconomy, which is all about the renewable economy, resource-based economy, waste stream economy, using natural fibers to replace carbon-producing products. Very, very interesting. But the interesting thing about it, different subject matter, you say, what's the connection? What could the possible connection be? The connection is that these systems are successful when you build an ecosystem around it, when you bring together communities of interest, sharing ideas, sharing risk, sharing challenges in a trust-based ecosystem that allows growth to take place. The other interesting characteristic about the work that we do and that's similar to yours is that standalone, any one of these items that you might build out might not be sustainable as a standalone piece. But as part of an organic system of organizations and people with similar values advancing the same concepts and projects, you create a system which I think actually is uniquely tuned to provinces like Nova Scotia, where we understand what community is, we understand the power of rural economic development and community development, we understand the value of interconnection. You know, companies sometimes call this goodwill on their books, right? I'm going to book goodwill because I've built a reputation and respect. And in many cases, that's what we're trading on, and there's a rediscovery of that. So today we have an extraordinary panel, and I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation. I'm going to get them to do a quick intro because one of the pieces that I want them to do in their intro, not just because there's a chance I may screw up the names, which is a really good possibility. It's a moderator's technique, right, is to get them, but also using kind of the stone soup analogy, which is kind of a theme which runs through all of the work that GEO does. What is it that you can bring to this conversation in particular? And I want it to be we're not doing it heavily structured. I want to follow kind of the model of GEO, which is allowing the conversation to take it where it needs to go. I'm going to keep people on time and on track, or Matt will give me a good cuff. But we're going to try to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. We may, depending on how it works out, how the conversation goes, maybe I'll get a chance to pull some audience conversation as well, because that would be important to us as well. So I'm going to start with the Minister. Minister, you're here. Thank you so much. This is not the first time I've seen you at one of these events. Your enthusiasm and energy for this is quite remarkable. So tell us, you could do your little introduction, but also tell us kind of, why is this really ringing through with government policy? It's an unusual policy to grab.
It is, and so I don't really have to go into my bio because, Bonnie, you did a great job already. Yeah. So folks know who I am, Minister Jill Balser. I have to start with when I'm thinking back to my pre-election time. And I worked in the nonprofit sector, so I think that that's one element that I can bring to any government conversation. It's bringing my whole self, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. And so what is it that I can bring to this conversation? So it's that experience. And when you mentioned the stone soup analogy, I worked with incredible people before I was the MLA and minister. And one in particular who is here, Matt, we also know she's celebrating a birthday. So Carrie, I wanted to be the first one to say happy birthday in front of everyone. Because working with you as a mentor and a friend has transformed how I show up into conversations. And the work with GEO is just a perfect example of how I can advocate. And when I was working in the nonprofit sector, and the collective impact analogy was very much, you have to share the responsibility, building trust, building respect, and that is through efforts and work and showing up in community and being present. So for government to come to the table, that needs to be expected, not only of government, but everyone who's coming to the conversation. So I said to myself back in 2021, when I was successful in being elected, that's how I was going to show up to conversations. I was going to be that government partner that I advocated for in the nonprofit world. And so that's why GEO is so important to me, but all of the organizations across the province that are doing such incredible work. Yep. And it's really highlighting what they're doing and building them up and supporting them, but recognizing that digital inclusion and closing that digital divide is something that we all can do together.
Yeah. In a moment, we're going to talk a little bit what we think that actually means. The other thing I think that's important in this approach is there's a certain level of humility that needs to be brought to the table. We all come, some of us older public policy folks, remember the time when government believed that all you needed was enough big brains in Ottawa or some other place, and they could figure out any problem. And that was the days of the mandarins, they called it, right? Well, today, I think social policy and public policy is much more complex. There's many more players and influencers in it, and you need to get to use a Cape Bretonism, you need to get to the coalface. And you need to do that with some humility and listen, and I think that has been a characteristic of this organization. So speaking about, I would say I want to stay with humility when I asked Matt to do his introduction, but I say humility because he shouldn't be humble. Here's an example of how one individual who built together a team of like-minded folks really has done some transformative work. This didn't, and with all due respect, this idea didn't come out of government, right? It was government responding to it. So Matt was one of the main architects of that and supporter of it, and he gives credit to other people a great deal, but credit is due when one individual really, I think, pushes that rock up the hill. So Matt, a few opening comments.
Well, thank you very much, Royden. I've been at this sort of work since 2016, tasked with working with others to bring different sectors together around complex social issues. And when the pandemic happened and everything was locked down, suddenly the issue of digital inclusion shot near the top of the list, right? Whether we were trying to support people with housing or education or healthcare or any number of kind of more conventional social challenges, lack of digital inclusion became a barrier to getting anywhere with any of those. But it also presented the perfect opportunity to practice what we'd been learning about all those years, which is really inspiring all those sectors that we keep talking about to come together around an issue that can't be solved by any one organization or department or even sector itself, right? But I would say, as far as my role goes, I learned a long time ago that one of you see these ant hills, right, in Africa, and they're like, 50 feet high and this sort of thing. And what happens, the ants have this instinct where if a pile gets started, that they'll add to that pile. So maybe I was the first ant to put the first piece of dirt down and say, hey, everyone, here's something cool, but I cannot take credit for how big it is now. That is the work of hundreds of people, lots of support and resources from all sectors, and we're pretty proud of it.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about how that developed when we talk about how big the problem is and the opportunity. Well, Doctor, Jackie, I'm going to ask you to provide some observations. You're AVP at Mount St. Vincent, a long-time full-time faculty at Dalhousie for many years, a researcher, and really with a particular focus, here I'm doing your introduction, a particular focus, I think, on disadvantaged people who are most likely to be disadvantaged by anything, by change, by anything new, by things that stuff that requires money. But Jackie, I'd like to provide an introduction and some thoughts. One of the things we did say in our earlier conversations as a group to say we're going to try and leave you with a couple of key thoughts, maybe even action items in your mind. So, Jackie, please.
Great, thanks for that, Royden. And my name is Jackie Gahagan. I'm Associate Vice President Research at Mount St. Vincent University. Fun fact number one, Mount St. Vincent University was the first to offer a tuition waiver for former youth in care. So that's really where I'm going to go with my comments, is think about the populations that could best benefit from the work that everybody's doing, including GEO Nova Scotia. And this is around access to education. So if you look in Nova Scotia, there's roughly 1,200 youth in care in Nova Scotia. So my question is, how are we looking at the digital divide that affects those youth in Nova Scotia? How are we looking at the 62,000 kids in care in Canada and making sure that they benefit from this? So we'll stop there.
Thank you.
That's great. And I see Katie's back there as well. Wanted to make sure that you knew, that we knew that you were here. Claire, you're with Digital Nova Scotia, correct? And I'll get you to do an introduction. But I guess part of one of the interesting elements that I've seen in government as well, starting some time ago, saying it's not good enough to get the pipe to people's front door. There has to be some content that's usable, deliverable, understandable as well. And with respect to government online and people's access to government services and all of that stuff, that's a product development piece as much as is anything else. And I know you're working on that, but let's have some of your thoughts about Digital Nova Scotia, which is taking a real leadership role, and that has been a huge transformation. That has gone from a kind of a minor footnote in government policy to really at the front burner of almost all the work a government does. So over to you.
Awesome, thank you so much. My name is Claire Kieran. I'm the Director of Project and Program Delivery at DNS. And it's really great to be here. And I want to give a big kudos to GEO, because I think what you've done here is gathered quite a range of perspectives, which is going to make for a really interesting conversation. So kind of the positioning that I hope to bring to this conversation is more so the employer and economical impact of digital inclusivity. What it means, if we're a province who doesn't have great inclusion, what that means for our ability to prosper and to innovate and therefore create jobs and comfortable living situations for people. So that's kind of the employer economic side is what I hope to bring to the conversation, because it all plays into the same problem here and the same opportunities.
Great.
So.
Thanks for that. Katie, it's a long way away. Also a soccer mom, I understand, from our earlier emails. Katie Heard with the Good Things Foundation. I've heard you speak, many in the room have heard you speak before about the work that your organization, not unlike what GEO is doing. Do you want to provide a little introduction and a kind of a little flavor of where you might go today?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. The worst thing about beaming into these conferences from afar is the size of my face on the screen. So I can't see that. So thanks very much for having me. Yeah, I'm Katie Heard. I'm Head of Research at Good Things Foundation in the UK. We are the leading digital inclusion charity in the UK, and we have been running for just over 15 years now in the UK, trying to fix the digital divide. So what I will bring to the conversation is obviously the perspective from the UK, what it looks like over here, and the challenges that we're facing, which are many the same as yours, but also hopefully bring some examples of how we're trying to address that, but both innovatively and differently. And also to kind of play in that kind of extra years of experience. Like I say, we've been doing this for 15 years, so hopefully we can share some insights that of path already traveled for some of those things with you. So yeah.
Great. So let's get to it. We've talked a fair amount about digital inclusion, and we have to be careful. Policy wonks that we all might tend to be a bit from time to time, using around language that people, what does that actually mean? What does digital inclusion? And I think from each one of you may have a different perspective. But how would you describe it if you were on the elevator and you've got 30 seconds to describe to somebody what the heck does this mean. I have the same problem with the bioeconomy, to tell you the truth, and it has to be a very, very long elevator ride, unfortunately. But I'm working on it. So used to do communications. I'm working on it. But let's talk. What is it? And then my corollary to that is going to be, what is it not? Right? What do people confuse it with? So let me see. Do you want to start?
I really messed up the order here. I just felt like I was blocking our other panelist here. So, to me, it's ensuring that people have the tools and the knowledge to be able to use those tools to be successful. So it's a lot around upskilling education, and that they have access, but also, yeah, the infrastructure and the knowledge to be able to use them appropriately. Kind of like the analogy that you use, you can give someone a tool, but if they don't know what to do with it, then how important is it, impactful is it? So.
Yeah. And do you, just change the question a little bit, what are the broader expectations of other folks? I mean, in the sense that, yes, you need access to those services, but is there an expectation always from employers, particularly and others, that in fact you are able to check your paycheck online, or you are able to work from home on a certain, I'm wondering increasingly whether that is just an expectation, which I think actually only applies to a certain percentage of the population, and it's a hell of a surprise when you discover that you're in the wrong population for your employer. So I'm just wondering, in answering the question, Minister, when you look at that, is there are you hearing from the people that you deal with it? This is my expectation. This is like showing up for work with your lunch pail.
Absolutely. And I can also bring the MLA perspective in operating a constituency office. I have to say that it is really interesting, the relationships that you have with your MLA and who comes to your office and what kind of questions. And you've got to be ready for anything. And I think when you link that person's individual needs, and so right now we're in grant season, as we call it in my office. Yeah. And so it could be, well, I can't read and write, so can you help me fill out the form? Or I don't have access to technology. So if it's, well, I've got the form on my phone, but I'm not sure how to actually submit it. So my office makes sure that we have volunteers who are doing that sort of hand-holding approach, but also trying to give that citizen the encouragement and the empowerment to say, well, you can do it next time, or when you come back to apply for the next grant, the process is the same. And I think that then linking it to our policy and government services, it's making sure that they're seamless, making sure that it makes sense, making sure it's plain language, and you click the button, you can visually see it, you understand that whole process. But what I love when you answer this question, it's also, again, that knowledge, and Claire, you said it too, it's the person has to feel confident, but who are they, reaching out to? So when you think about the digital literacy, or like the digital champions that are part of GO2, it's those relationships in community that mean so much to someone, because they're not always going to come to government or a constituency office, but they might talk to their employer, they might talk to a friend, they might talk to a family member, or someone in the community that they know.
Yeah. So Matt, I'm actually, to be a little bit more effective here and cover the span a little bit better, I may actually give you a different question, which I'll invite all to respond. If COVID didn't happen, right? If we didn't have this crisis, which suddenly made it very clear that there's a whole bunch of services. Again, it was one of those cases where I know even the Department of Education, School Board, just assumed that if we could send people home, they could do their work. There was an assumption there, right? But if that didn't happen, that crisis didn't happen, do you think we would have got enough attention? Did hit the crisis was enough to trigger this, or would have happened on its own, this type of work?
No, we wouldn't be here right now if that crisis didn't happen. We would certainly, in my mind, society, government, business, people would continue to migrate online, but it would have been at a much slower pace, and probably at just such a rate that the friction and the problems with not being online would stay under the radar. And we'd find ourselves 10 years from now with all of us online, except for the people that aren't, and not even a thought for them. So I think, that one of the benefits of this crisis was such a shock that it was able to kind of snap us into an awareness of the gap. And also it stimulated some resources and some energy and some thinking that we've got to do some things differently. We've got to figure some things out. And so I think it was a moment that we seized here in Nova Scotia. Yeah.
there's obviously a line in public policy says you can never waste an opportunity to exploit a crisis, right? To do good things, So, Jackie, I'm interested in the work that you're doing, and you mentioned earlier, with vulnerable individuals, and why that access. Not all things are equal, right? All animals are equal, but four legs good, two eggs bad, or whatever that phrase was. But in this case, how is digital accessibility and that viability, how is that, on one hand, how are the vulnerable groups just in a worse position than others to gain it initially, and are the consequences of them not having access disproportional as well?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Royden. I just wanted to follow up on the sort of crisis that COVID actually created for already marginalized populations.
Please,
So
yes.
it's not new news to anybody in this room and beyond that the folks that were most impacted by COVID were the ones that would have been left behind had not COVID. This is going to sound very strange, but had not that particular issue happened, particularly in the education sector, we could have continued to ignore folks in terms of digital literacy, in terms of access to needed equipment, in terms of high-speed internet in rural Nova Scotia to be able to get online to get to your classes. So I'm not suggesting that we need another COVID to reset something else, which I'm not going there, but if we understand that education is a key determinant of health, just think about all of those individuals that because of cost, because of where they live, or because of other situations beyond their control, did not have access. Once COVID happened, there was no, I'm just going to go into my doctor's office. No, there is no option for some people in terms of going online, making appointments, having distance appointments rather than in-person appointments. So just think about that cascade effect from this means you can't get to your classes, you don't have the equipment you need to do them, and so many post-secondary institutions in Nova Scotia actually had lending libraries of laptops. Like that's how basic we're talking about. People who don't have the equipment they need, universities, post-secondary institutions of all sorts actually digging deep and saying this is a problem because all of these students are now expecting the institutions to actually find a solution. So the solution was this lending library. But if I can just give a shout out again to Geo Nova Scotia. In the case of youth who are in care, those individuals experience a variety of intersecting axes of oppression, that's for sure. So this compounds their inability to actually get the educational resources they need. So what happens in that case? We partner with Geo Nova Scotia. So Geo Nova Scotia sees where we have a need, and these are individuals who are low income, living in rural Nova Scotia, who are tuition waiver recipients, and the only way they can go to school is to have access to the needed equipment and tools. So I'm really grateful to Geo Nova Scotia for partnering with Mount St. Vincent University and our other partners that we've sent your way. But we need to really think about the access to resources. And then the other point that was raised is around digital literacy. So don't just give me this and say, off you pop, go do your homework, but actually giving people the tools they need to actually have that level of digital literacy. Thanks.
Thank you. And as I jump to Katie, I'm also interested in what about some unexpected benefits that came from this. I've talked to some folks in education, doing a debrief on that, and some interesting things happen. And for some students with some particular types of learning disabilities, for instance, they did exceptionally well through online programming, because it's a different cognitive process of learning that way. So I hope as well that not necessarily that we need a crisis, but that we are fully open to exploiting where this might take us in new opportunities. And the LD one is one that I think is really, really interesting, and we have to be careful we don't get back. Now I'm dating myself and thinking where the teacher said, "Don't use your calculator; it's cheating," right? That we can't go there again. But I think there's some unexpected benefits if we open up the lens a little bit. Now, Katie, you really, your work in the UK has been something that Geo has looked at quite a bit. You followed a different model. It's a bigger model. It's a national focused model. But tell us about your experience. I know I was on your website, a lot of good data about the groups that have been excluded and not excluded. But is it a similar, do you think it's a similar challenge in Nova Scotia as the UK? And tell us how how's it going? How's the work going?
Pretty good, I think. We've not fixed the problem yet, though, so that would be nice, wouldn't it? To have everybody digitally included. Yeah, it's going well in the UK. Our model in the UK is to help fix the problem for individuals from multiple different angles. So we recognise that skills and confidence is a barrier to being online, absolutely, and we provide learning for that, as well as a network of community hubs across the UK to provide that support. But then also we recognise that poverty plays a big role in people being digitally excluded, just as other panel members have talked about. So we provide, with the support of our telcos, free data packages to those people that need them, but also free devices as well to anybody who needs them. Very few questions asked. If somebody is brave enough to come into a hub to ask for either a device or data, we believe that that is justification enough to say that you probably do need it. So yeah, so that's our model. And over the last 3 years of our strategy, we have helped over 1 million people with one of those services, and our network of hubs is now over 8,000. So we have grown massively in that time. But like I say, we have not fixed the problem. In the national data sets, we aren't seeing that kind of level of movement in the numbers, even though we are out there. And I think one of the things we recognise is that digital exclusion and inclusion is quite dynamic. So people can move in and out of being excluded on quite a regular basis. So from a poverty perspective, that might mean 1 week they are able to afford their mobile phone contract and the next week they are not. Or it might mean that they drop or break their device and suddenly they are digitally excluded because they can't afford to replace it. From a skills perspective, if people aren't practicing to use the skills on a regular basis, they forget. If the support they've got locally to them disappears, so they were relying on a family member or a neighbour to help them get online, if they disappear, they are suddenly digitally excluded again. So it's not that easy to push everybody forwards, and once you've pushed them forwards, they stay there. They keep cycling back round. And we, like I say, we recognise poverty as a big element of this. One of the interesting things post-COVID, we've got a data set that's been collected on skills levels of adults over the whole period. So from about 2017 all the way through to now. What we saw in 2020 was an uplift in the number of people who did have the skills to be online, which was great. We were really excited. Great progress has been made, but then that dropped back within the kind of 18 months after that. So that is the illustration, really, that you can move people forwards when people are in the depths of needing to do something, they will get it done. But if they're not using it, if they're not practicing it, if they don't have the continuous support, then that disappears. And the pace of change of technology means that we are continuing to see people who were included being left behind because they can't use the latest app. The app has been updated, the design has changed, and suddenly they get frightened. They don't know how to navigate it and they walk away. So yeah, we are making good progress, but we haven't got it fixed.
Yeah, I can tell you that I used the program Word Perfect for about 2 years longer than it was no longer supported because I didn't want to change, even though, anyway, it turned out they made Word a lot like Word Perfect, so it worked. Matt, you have some observations?
Yeah, I just want to build on what Katie shared. You asked previously about kind of a definition of digital inclusion, and Geo Nova Scotia has used 3 pillars all along. Yeah. You need devices, you need connectivity, and you need the basic skills to use them safely and confidently. And what I love about the UK and Katie's work is they have a 4th pillar. Their table has 4 legs, which is more stable than a 3-legged table. Because as Katie points out, that 4th pillar is ongoing support. that digital, in particular, the skills isn't something I can give to you and then you've got it and walk away. It's like hygiene. You actually have to keep up. You can't just brush your teeth once, right? You gotta keep doing it. So, and so that's what we really love about that model, and it does speak to where we need to think of as a province. Like, how do we actually get enough people out there in communities, in relation to each other, carrying the skills or the tools or the confidence to then help the person beside them, right? It isn't going to be a top-down model that reaches everybody, because especially once you're out of school, we all learn so differently, you know, what we want to learn, when we want to learn it, how we want to learn it, and from somebody that we already know and trust. So we're quite inspired by that in the UK, and also by the government's support and enthusiasm for the idea of building out a huge network of champions around the province, of volunteers, helpers. We've got the emergency management panel happening this afternoon.
Yes, I see that. Very
including someone representing the Nova Scotia Guard.
Yep.
And that's another example. Hundreds of Nova Scotians signing up to say, if someone needs help, I'll be here for you. And I think that that's the spirit that we should look at, because you know, digital inclusion isn't just like closing that gap, right? It creates potentials that aren't there before. Geo Nova Scotia wouldn't exist if we weren't all online to build it, right? We've met thousands of times with hundreds of people from one end of the province to the other, and I didn't have to leave my basement, which is good, right? It saves gas and saves time, and you couldn't have that many meetings with that many people to make it happen. So it's just such a powerful, powerful tool for people.
Yeah, and I think we saw that as well, kind of the empowerment of the region. You know, there's lots of folks here that I think probably everyone has relatives that were working somewhere else that post-COVID ended up back in Nova Scotia, and their employer said they could stay. You know, and that has happened. That's at a particular level. Obviously, socioeconomic level is probably not the most challenging element, but it does change the way we do work. But you've all answered the question, not directly, but what it isn't, which is a piece that I put in the end. It isn't if the minister showed up today and says, look, I got a 18-wheeler in the parking lot full of computers, and here's cards for people to get free internet. That would be nice. It's a necessary condition for people participating, but it is not sufficient. That's what I'm hearing. The accessibility and digital, you know, that access and capacity is not about technology, and infrastructure is critical, but it is not. It's not the element that makes it work. It's that community of interests and shared support. It's the It's that. Well, in the old days we called that kind of the learning community. Old days, but you know. But it is that learning community that makes that creates the value that works. So it's and it's not so you can watch Netflix, although that's not excluded from the possibility, but that's not what this is about. So that makes me think a little bit more about the types of services and how we engage with people from a technological perspective as well. Has it changed, I guess, the minister or, Claire, you may have a view on this as well. Has it changed how government is approaching how they build out programs now or services? When I was in government, we always said, but we are still going to have you still have to have the ability for someone to write it in, because some people just will not go on the internet. But as far as delivering services, is now kind of the digital accessibility of that now a front measure tool, or is it we tack it in later? Minister first.
I'd love to jump in on this one, because I know that there are folks from the Department of Cybersecurity and Digital Solutions who are here. I feel like everyone should just give a little wave for those who are here in the room, and then if anyone's joining us online. Yeah, there we go. And the team in the back there too. And I think to your point, and this is where we have a designated department now.
Yeah.
And that was such an important step. And I mean, I think it sounds like words in some ways. That's right. That's right. To show government's commitment to not only what we're doing to support and protect Nova Scotians' information, and giving them, again, the tools and the knowledge to be able to protect themselves when it comes to interacting online, but having a design team that is looking at a human-centered approach. So when it comes to the usability of any government service, and so as we continue to migrate some of those online, and we have been very successful in a number of them, and I know the team will be very excited when I say that if you want to book your driver's test, you can now do that online.
Yeah.
So things like this are really important. And so again, when I mentioned in my constituency office, the grant applications all have to be online. Well, the CSDS team are the ones who are designing that with the intention of the user. And I think that that's what's really important, because I'm also happen to be the Minister for Service Nova Scotia, and they go hand in hand because that experience with government is reflected in that interaction. And so then you might be coming in to register for a driver's license test, or you're getting your driver's license itself, or it's the lands registry, or whatever brings you into an access center. That then trickles into your relationship and connection with another government department. So if we're doing strides to make that interaction seamless, well, we need to make sure that that's consistent across government. And so I mentioned too, for myself and advocating with the rest of my colleagues, we have to make sure that all departments are in sync with this. So again, it's not just CSDS's responsibility to make sure that all policy that government is looking at is inclusive to digital needs, but it's going to, and I know that Minister Armstrong will be here later on today from the Department of Opportunities and Social Development. It's making sure, again, that we are all consistent with that message to Nova Scotians.
And Claire, is it changing how you do your work?
Yeah, I mean, COVID really shone a light on that every business is digital, and that opened a lot of eyes. So a lot of the work that we do is with other industries. You know, we've been around for over 35 years, and we've always focused on the tech industry. That's, obviously a big part of our mandate. But over the last few years, as we've shifted that a bit to focus on digital inclusivity and digital adoption across all industries, because if you think about, for example, tourism, like that took a big hit during COVID, and a lot of these companies, mostly small businesses, 98% of the businesses in Nova Scotia are small to medium businesses. They didn't even have websites, so people couldn't book online. Like this contributes to the prosperity of our economy. So people were losing their businesses because they didn't have the skills or the tools. People were losing their jobs because they couldn't keep up. They didn't know how to update the website or manage a social media account or all these things. So it's actually an expectation now. That's just baseline. And the tough thing about the digital world is that baseline constantly changes, right? So now, especially with the adoption of AI, Nova Scotia is actually in the top 3 kind of within Canada leading of AI adoption, which is exciting, but on a global stage, we're very far behind. So if you think about our economy as a whole, we need to keep up in order for businesses to want to operate here, to create jobs so people don't have to live in poverty. All these things, it's all cyclical. They all feed into each other. So it's an expectation now to be online in certain ways, and the challenge is that bar keeps being raised. So it's a matter of how do we keep people in a position where they're not everyone needs to be innovating and leading the charge, but in a way that they're able to operate successfully in the new digital age.
Great. And Katie, yes, please. I had a question for you too, so that's great.
Yeah, just if I can come in, we've seen significant changes in the UK. So the change of government last year meant that the department that were looking after digital inclusion went from 1 employee at government level to 40 in the space of about 3 or 4 months. So digital inclusion is being prioritised at government level for us now, which is fantastic, a massive shift. But we see huge shifts in our kind of public services, but not necessarily adoption. So the NHS in the UK has an app for all patients to access their services through. Only 55% of the population have actually downloaded that app. So that's 45% who haven't. You can guarantee that the 45% who haven't are the people that are the highest users of the health services. So they are the people who are digitally excluded. They are the people with long-term health conditions. They are the people with low literacy, not English as their first language, the people that are traditionally socially excluded. So And the NHS has just come out with a new 10-year plan where they are, their ambition is to make digital their new front door. There will be, that will be the first point of call. If we've got almost half of the population that aren't adopting the digital services that are there at the moment, they've got a long way to go. So our campaign in the UK is really to encourage all public services to bake in digital inclusion, not bolt it on. So to design for digital inclusion from the beginning, not to try and shoehorn it in later once you've designed those services. And that is really starting to kind of gain momentum amongst colleagues across government, but also in kind of private services providers as well.
Thank you. And Jackie, I'm interested particularly in your, the work that you've been studying, working, promoting, advancing, agitating for many years in the areas of really groups that have been excluded or disadvantaged. Do you see, there's kind of two ways of looking at this technology. We use the technology to make sure they don't slip further behind, so we keep, but are we just kind of encapsulating the existing inequality by just holding the line? Is there some opportunity here that we can leapfrog over some of these equity challenges, these participatory challenges, community, even the loneliness challenges? I know that you used to have a minister of loneliness in the UK. Which is probably to be a Tory minister right now, but in any event, what does, is there a chance that we, instead of just holding the line, that there are opportunities to fix some older problems that we just haven't got to before?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Roy. And I would say there is definitely a generational divide, and you alluded to it in your word perfect. What is word perfect? What's word perfect? No,
Yeah.
Just kidding. We don't know what that is.
Corral. All government people had
Tandy,
used word
Tandy
perfect because it was a
64,
Canadian company.
whatever. So there is a generational divide, and I think what needs to happen is we need to build trust in virtual spaces and better trust in virtual services. So, when Katie's talking about like 45% of folks in the UK are not involved in that space, that is a problem, because that means finite resources are being overrun by individuals who don't trust the system, the electronic system. They need to speak to an actual person. So there is a generational piece to that. So my humble suggestion, if I may, is we need to have better data, and I'm sorry to say that because that's going to sound like a very academic approach to this issue, but as an evaluator, and I've evaluated lots of policies and lots of programs over my career, and what we really need to think about now is how are we collecting and evaluating, and I know Nova Scotia is doing a good job in that regard, but I think across all of the services, to Katie's point, where we see a lack of uptake in the digital space, why is that, and which populations in particular are less likely to utilize those or trust those services and spaces? So I think there's lots of room for better data. We definitely need better data. I would suggest that we evaluate what we're currently doing to make sure that we're hitting the mark. Thank you.
Okay, Matt, you're going to...
I have to take this opportunity, thank you, Jackie, to make a shout out to our friends in the corner from Engage Nova Scotia.
Hey.
So for those of you who don't know, Engage Nova Scotia put out their big quality of life survey a number of years ago, one of the biggest, broadest studies of its kind in the whole world. And they're about to blow that out of the water with their new study, which will not only be available for every single Nova Scotian. So I think this is the single largest study of its kind in the world. It'll be one of the richest data sets ever pulled together about people's experience. And in those questions are several questions specifically about digital inclusion. And so we're really excited when that process is done in the next year to have such a picture of what's happening in Nova Scotia. And I think we're going to use that as our baseline. But I would definitely say we do need more data to understand what's happening and how things are changing.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to ask all of you now to kind of do a quick wrap up, which will include, in the next 6 months to a year, what would you like to see happen? What was the one thing either you could do or you could do to help move this agenda forward? I just want to make the simple point on the data is so powerful, even just from a user perspective. And when I was on the private sector side, even we used to do that. We would when we moved everything to online marketing and whatnot, we tracked, when did somebody stop looking at the page, right? And we discovered people never go past 3 pages. And then you discover, and then we also, to give you one example, we also discovered that people who make an application at 4:30 in the morning are never going to show up. So there's also, and I'm just telling you, there's actual real data that you can pull out of that sort of stuff, and you get that even from the consumer experience, I think, as well. I have to be careful with it, but I think it's useful for continuous improvement. So let's, I'm going to start way over in England with Katie. What do you think the next 6 months could look like, or a year could look like, and what are the what do you hope for, and what could we do?
So I think for us, the biggest step change we can make is better data, to be honest.
Okay.
We don't have a national data set that shows us how many people are digitally excluded because of poverty that overlaps with the skills piece. We have them in separate data sets. So it's really difficult for us to make a really strong business case for investment and change. So we like you guys over there have just launched 3 kind of questions that help us do that in a single data set for many survey providers to use, so that we can start to build up that picture. I think the data is the first piece. We launch our new strategy in January, looking forward to the next 3 years, and that is much more focused on systemic change. So whilst we will continue to support people directly, we want to see much more change at the centre, and then that is cascaded out. So it is much more for us about seeing the progress on baking in, not bolting on, digital inclusion. I think that for us will be a real success in the next 6 months.
Great. Jackie, what do you think?
I 100%, Katie, thank you. I'm going to echo and shout out what Katie said.
You guys, a little collusion going on here, I think. That's all right.
But I completely agree. We need better data to inform better policies. And one area that I think we can lean into, as I said at the outset of my comments, there are roughly 1,200 youth in care in Nova Scotia. They are 50% maybe will finish high school. So what is happening that they are not finishing high school? And depending on whose data you look at, less than 5% will go to post-secondary. So what are we doing nationally around this issue? And can we actually look at how the digital divide needs of youth and care are being met? So that would be my ask to folks in this room. And our team is wrapping up a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council partnership development grant, and that's how we partnered with Geo Nova Scotia. If there are other partners in the room, our team would be happy to talk to you about how we can actually dig deep with this particular vulnerable population, because we can invest now or we can invest later through the criminalization of youth by no choice of their own, end up in poverty, homeless, etc. So I think we can do better with that one particular population. So that's a homework assignment in case anyone
That's a
was
good
wondering.
homework assignment, which pays dividends too. If we solve these problems, there's a lot of other problems that can follow behind that can be solved. Matt, what do you think for the next little while?
It's hard to think past 4:30 today, but I'll do
All
my
right.
best.
That's true enough, eh?
Something, I was going to save this actually for a little bit later today to make this announcement. We love announcements at GEO. Something that is happening in the next 6 months that's very exciting for us this December. We'll be partnering with a few other groups for the province's largest mobile phone drive in history. It's an opportunity for GEO to engage the entire province in a way to support the work, right? So that question about like, what can I do? Or the stone soup analogy.
Yeah.
Everyone has something to contribute. Everyone benefits from digital inclusion. And to finally give people that opportunity to dig in their drawers and pull out those mobile phones and drop them off to us and our partners across the province and have them professionally refurbished and paired with a phone card and handed out to people in crisis, people experiencing homelessness or fleeing gender-based violence. We want at least 1,000 phones this December to kick things off, and we hope to grow every year. So I think more opportunities to scale and involve more people, more organizations, and more sectors is a big part of the next year for us.
Well, and the exciting thing about that stuff is that we're solving, I like to think we're trying to do the same thing at the bioinnovation. You can solve more than one problem at a time. So you've just solved the whole recycling problem with that, as well as providing access. So that is one of the interesting, when you take the systemic community-based approach. Minister, back to you.
Thank you. And so I think success in the next 6 months, and this is a conversation I've been having with the team, and making sure that the ongoing commitment, Matt, as you mentioned it, for the Good Things Foundation, it being that fourth pillar, it's what is government's role in that? And so making sure, again, that those cross-government department conversations are happening, and really being a leader in that space to make sure that when the data is brought forward and we as policymakers can make sure that we're doing that from an informed place, that really is the essence of what we can deliver as government, and again, for those programs to citizens. And so also thinking about a strategy, a digital inclusion strategy for our province. And so having the Premier's office blessing to be able to explore that, what would that look like for Nova Scotia? Sure. That would be a huge success in my mind. And then another one is elevating that conversation to the national level. So recognizing that this is happening in global partners. And so, Katie, I just appreciate your contributions today, because you're also showing us what's possible. And so that was my commitment to Nova Scotians, is to be able to bring that conversation to those federal, provincial, territorial meetings to say, Nova Scotia, we are so uniquely positioned to be a leader in this space. And we are, for all the partners that are here today and all of the work that's being done. So we got to keep going. And then I also think from a year out, we've also had some conversations about maybe even declaring Digital Inclusion Week in legislation. That could be something maybe for next time around, but that would be success too.
That would be marvelous. All right, Katie, take us home.
All right. Well, digital inclusivity is not just a social issue. It's also an economic strategy. So that is definitely, we have a lot of momentum here in Nova Scotia. We recently, Halifax in particular, went from ranked number 5 top emerging tech hub to number 2 in North America. So we have momentum. AI adoption just in Nova Scotia has doubled in the last year. So we're moving, we're grooving, and I think, what would be success to us is we love data, so we'll take any data we can get. But we also love funding and support and resources, so I'll put that out there. So we want to see that momentum continue and to quicken. So that would be success to us. I'm going to speak on behalf of my team, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, that's great. Well, folks, we've come to the end. I just wanted to thank you for your attention. The fact that we're the first in the morning, we could have screwed this all up on everybody and put it down. But I think the energy is right, and it's a thoughtful energy as well, which is important. This is empowering to people, I think, as professionals, as people care about our province and our communities. It's empowering because some of us could spend a lifetime in the public service and never actually see that the next day we've actually had an impact. This is different. This is stuff you get to see right away, the impact. And I think there's a bit of undiscovered country element to this. I was trying to pursue a little bit with Jackie. I think there's an opportunity to solve some problems we might not even know we have yet, or we have to keep our minds open to the possibility of something emerging that's unexpected, but because it's unexpected doesn't mean it's wrong. It means we may want to embrace that opportunity, and that requires trust. It requires a confidence level. It requires a level of engagement that I think is different than we've approached it before. And it also requires that we abandon kind of the zero-sum mentality sometimes that we have, that if Geo succeeds, somebody else doesn't. It truly is one of those opportunities where, to use a good old maritime adage, that all ships well, you would know this, all ships are raised by a rising tide, right, or are lifted by a rising tide, and that really is what this is about. It's about an ecosystem of energy and opportunity and trust, and my prediction will be that something completely unexpected but good is going to keep our minds open for it. Folks, thank you. Did you have a last comment? Or
I just want to let the people in the room know that you can still scan the barcodes on the wall to win the door prize. They change up every session, so you can keep winning. Just go scan those QR codes. Use some technology. And
thank you, Katie, again. It's good to see you again, and for your contribution. Good luck with your new strat plan. I know Matt will be borrowing from it. We like to reuse, recycle, reimagine as part of our agenda, so we look forward to that and continue that communication. Thank you for this panel very, very much. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone.